This is the August 20th, 2026 Crossplane community meeting. Let me drop a link into the Zoom chat, this window here, to the agenda doc directly. So if folks want to add anything in there, then they're more than welcome to do so. The first thing on mind for today is that the 2.4 release is available. It's the artifacts are there, it's present, you can start installing it. Release notes are available. There's more to come here. There's a few loose ends to tie up on to finish off the release, and then there's a set of patch releases that are coming as well. Because as always, there are tons of CVEs and security vulnerabilities and our dependencies that are always getting updated basically every few days. So we'll do a round of patch releases for all the supported versions. So 2.4, 2.3, no, 2.4 is the current release, and 2.3, 2.2, and 1.20 as well. So a couple of the highlights from the 2.4 release here. So we've added the functionality of, XRs and composition logic when they're running their functions. They could say, hey, there's some resources that I need to be able to use as inputs. We call them required resources. And historically, Crossplane would do nothing if those changed. You would have to wait for your poll interval or your TTL of the functions to expire in order to be able to run another reconciliation. But now you can watch those directly. So if any of your required resources that your functions need change, your XR will get reconciled right away. So you can stay on top of changing inputs to your function, basically. We have a scale to zero functionality now for providers. The providers that can do safe starts, as in, hey, I'm a provider, I've got lots of CRDs, but nobody's activated any of them through their managed resource definitions. If you have that, if a provider has that, and nobody's activated anything, then Crossplane can now, the package manager could say, oh, this provider's not actually in use. We don't need to waste all these resources to do nothing. It'll scale it down to zero and basically save all of that, save a pod and all the resources that you use. So that's nice. The release artifacts for Crossplane, like the container images, are now vulnerability scannable. When we moved over to Nix as our build system, we some things were getting stripped out of the release artifacts there, such that a vulnerability scanning tool would run over it and only see the Ghost Internet Library and Crossplane's core stuff. It wouldn't see any other dependencies, so you'd be missing a lot of potential CB vulnerability stuff if you just scan the images. So we've corrected that, we backported that. And so images now have, you can scan them and find vulnerabilities in any of the dependencies. So it's much easier for the community to understand if a Crossplane image has any, vulnerabilities in it. We invested a fair amount in the package manager as well, using like server-side apply on the runtime objects and deployment runtime config. So if you make updates to it, it'll actually get picked up as opposed to having to create a new revision or bounce the pod or anything like that. So that's pretty nice. And then I think I didn't realize how annoying this was until it got fixed. But if you go to docs.crossplane.io now and search for things, it's actually scoped now to the version that you're on. So you can see here we're only getting 2.3 results, and also like if you're on an older older release, then searching for there gives you information that's only that is for that older release as well. So no longer do you go to the Crossplane doc site and like search for something and then get something from 2.4 that doesn't even exist in V1. So that's a little bit friendlier docs searching experience there that was included in the release as well today. I think that was the highlights. The release notes have a whole bunch of other information, including one that let's jump into right now, actually, because we had it further down. But I think it's pretty important, and let's just call it out right now. So with the 2.4 release today, there is a big message here about we now have a plan as a project for the end of life timeline for 1.20 release. So 1.20 was released more than a year ago. V2 was released exactly a year ago, or a little bit more than a year ago now. And we've been continuing to provide support in terms of critical fixes and dependency updates and stuff like that in 1.20. And so now this is the last release we'll be doing that. So we will continue to be doing maintenance on 1.20 through the next release cycle here until 2.5 is released, which is November 2026. So in November, 2.5 comes out. And that's when we will declare 1.20 at its end of life, and we will no longer do any support or maintenance there. Some of the things that make this much easier than I had originally thought is that, oh, sorry, and this is a hugely important note. This means that we won't create new patch releases and stuff for literally the 1.20 release. Like V1 concepts, like claims and cluster scope resources, etc. Those are still supported in Crossplane V2. The backwards compatibility support that we've had there still remains. That's not going away. So it's literally the 1.20 release itself will stop getting updates, basically. So upgrading to V2 it does not require you to migrate your resources. You don't have to start using namespaced XRs and namespaced managed resources and such like that. We have a checker tool that you can run in your control plane and look for the specific old deprecated features that are breaking changes, that are removed from V2. We expect and hope that not many people are affected by those because they had been deprecated for a while before we made those breaking changes in V2, and it's been a year as well now also. But to make that smoother, we do have an automated tool. Make sure to try that out. But we expect that folks do not have to do migrations to get to V2, and it should be you should be able to upgrade to V2 directly. That's the hope there. Let me know if folks have feedback on that or issues, etc. I should probably update the release notes with the V2 migration discussion in general, because if folks do eventually want to migrate to namespace resources, which you do not have to do as part of this, upgrading to V2, it's there's a lot of work and chatter about that. So opinions on that will be very helpful. So once again, V1.20 will be hit its end of life in November when we release 2.5. Until then, we'll do patch releases for it, but in November, 1.20 gets no more maintenance. Okay, sweet. So we'll finish the 2.4 releases today, the patch releases. I think the release board only has one issue on it, which is an intent test issue. Yeah, everything else is in the done column, looking like the releases converge there. So next community meeting, we'll talk about 2.5. We'll have the release board up there. We'll talk about the features, etc. But let's today close out 2.4, get that shipped, and have that done. Anything else for core Crossplane releases that folks wanted to mention, ask questions about, anything there? All right. Well, I will turn it to Jonas real quick to talk about various ecosystem updates and investments as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
There's a lot of them, so I will try to make it quick. One of the biggest updates, I would say, is new release of Crossplane runtime. There was a community contribution that tracked and then solved some of the memory issues that object-based providers, Crossplane runtime-based providers had. And now we ship a new function which you can bootstrap into your both object and non-object based providers that we've seen that leads to a lot of memory benefits. You have some example data here in a cluster with around 2000 CRDs, which you can easily hit with Crossplane. We were able to have a memory benefit of, I would say, like 9 times smaller than before that, only due to that change. Currently, we are working as a ecosystem team to release that across all providers that we maintain. So over 20 providers right now. And it's also available to anyone that maintains a community provider.
And Jonas, do you know if anybody has picked that change up and shipped it in a provider yet? Because I know we've got
Not
like an example of like how to. This is literally all it takes, I believe.
Yeah, so
Has anyone done
if
that
you
yet?
check provider Terraform, we've just merged a PR today that introduces
Oh,
that
sweet.
change.
Nice.
So you can check provider Terraform. I believe it was around like 20-ish lines of code total that we had to do there.
Okay.
So it's a really small investment from your side, really big benefit for the users of provider. Highly recommended to check that release.
Nice.
On that topic, Abjad also had a release. Few notable changes are that we support runtime Terraform conversions in the CLI-based model. So things like singleton list to embedded object, which were only used in no fork providers, are now available in CLI-based providers as well. And we've introduced the storage version migration. You can now auto migrate resources with that used the old API version as a storage version in etcd. Provider GCP already introduced that feature, so you can check provider GCP v3 release on how it was done and how you can use that particular feature. And yeah, I think that's the most notable changes in Abjet. Um, I will add the comment with the provider GCP PR that introduced that so that you can have a reference. Yeah, so small model plane update. Model plane is our AI inference composition. We've just released version 0.3, which adds support for Voltaire as infra provider, support for Anthropic message APIs, some new recipes for deployments. If you want to check it out, here's the blog post that you can read. If you are interested in self-hosted AI inference, then that's probably a good thing to check. And in the provider and function ecosystem, we have so many changes that I won't be going through all of them. But we've had releases for provider Abjet, AWS, GCP, Azure, and Azure AD, which all bumped Terraform provider to the latest version. If you are using them, please check the release notes. Some of them had small breaking changes. Everything should be in the release note marked as warning. So just for backwards compatibility, make sure to read the notes before you update it. All of those releases also shipped Crossplane runtime v2.3, which enables pair managed resource reconciliation poll interval that you can check. So if you are hoping for that feature, it's now shipped in all providers from that list. We've also released and updated provider Kubernetes and provider Helm. Provider Helm had a really big change because we've updated Helm SDK from v3 to v4. It's a substantial change because now server-side apply is the default apply method, and we also have wait, which is backed by case status, which means that you have much more, that health checks are much more close to the real state than they were before, because Helm v3 wait feature is not the best, as some of you may know. So yeah, highly recommended to check it out, but also please review runtime behavior before you apply and upgrade in the production clusters, because of the change to case status and to server side apply, you may see some differences in how provider Helm behaves. And we've also had a lot of community releases. You can check the list here. I believe it's over 20 or maybe even 30 releases in the last month. So as you can see, community is really doing a lot of work, and we are really grateful to see that a lot of people are investing into Crossplane and that there's more and more users of Crossplane. On the investments topic, we are working on introducing performance improvements from the aforementioned Crossplane runtime PR. So we are currently working on putting that into Abjet provider template, non-Abjet provider template, and I believe over 15 Abjet-based providers in the ecosystem. And we are also doing active work on introducing some performance improvements in provider Kubernetes, and later in provider Helm after that gets merged. There's also some work on upgrading and unifying Renovate configurations across the ecosystem so that we can ensure that every provider in Crossplane contrib has the same Renovate behavior, that we can fix the CVEs as soon as they are there, and that we are always up to date, which is important in those times. And yeah, I think that's all from ecosystem topics. So if you have any questions about any specific feature, or if you would like to get some links to example PR, stuff like that, just let me know in the chat. I will try to find all of them. And then we can link them to the Google Doc as well.
Cool. Thank you very much, Jonas, for going through all of that. It does look like the ecosystem of around Crossplane and of extensions has a lot of things going on. So appreciate you sharing your on the ground knowledge of all that stuff with us. Anything else that folks want to bring up for other provider updates, function updates, anything at all? All right. Okay, let's keep on moving to the community topics section. So as always, collected a couple different links for folks that want to click through these later that are mentioning and talking about Crossplane stuff. So feel free to click on those at your leisure. Adam is out on vacation. Adam Wolf Gordon, that is. We do have another Adam here with us. So one Adam's on vacation. But so just a quick update there. We're planning a v2.5 release of the Crossplane CLI to be going out, I think this week. I think Christopher Haar is going to be running that one. So I expect by the end of the week, we'll have a 2.5 out there with all the latest merge PRs and functionality. And another reminder and note there, right, that Crossplane CLI, it's in its own repo now. It has its own release timelines, its own versioning, et cetera. It's diverged from Crossplane. So this is, that has happened, and we're seeing the effects of that. And Crossplane CLI is its own thing now, independent of Crossplane Core. All right, we talked through the end of life for 1.20. So I just mentioned it one more time that until November, 1.20 will continue to get security updates and critical fixes as needed. But when 2.5 gets released, it will hit end of life and it will no longer be updated. All right. I wanted to mention this kind of pressing issue because especially for contributors, with your own PRs, everyone basically in core Crossplane is affected by this right now. So the end-to-end tests that run, there is a particular test that's run across 3 different suites, I believe, where it is testing the functionality that the package manager can use given credentials to access a package in a private repository, pull it, install it, and everything works fine. We had this package for years, and I think people forgot about it. I forgot about it, kind of. We had it in a location in GCP. That location has since been cleaned up. We didn't really realize that it was actually in use by the Crossplane project, so we made a bit of a oversight there with where this resource lives with some of our cleanup. And so now that's causing at least 3 different end-to-end suites on all PRs to fail. So that's kind of hurting our ability to get good signal on regressions. It's never a good situation when you see a consistent red X on a PR, then you start, glazing over it and not really paying attention to it. So we want to get this updated as soon as possible. It's a bit of a sticky situation-ish though, because the credentials have to be somewhere, and it has to be in a place that anybody can run this test. Also, it can't just be a secret that only CI can run, because developers can run these end-to-end tests on their own laptops or machines as well. And a lot of the GitHub does not let you do that for most all scenarios. So we're kind of trying to figure out another place to put this. Maybe it's another GCP project, I don't know, but we will figure this out because it's causing red X's on literally every PR. So it's something I have it in the 2.4 milestone, even though 2.4 is shipping, because it's not shipping code, it's an end-to-end test code. But I want to make sure people are aware of this, so that if you open a PR and you get a bunch of red X's, that's why, most likely, or unless your test is broken. But if you see a red X, you will see a red X. I'll just say that. All right. Sweet. So those are the notifications there. So yes, we have some visitors, this or regular joiners as well, to this community meeting here that want to talk about the new inventory SDK. So I will go ahead to let you share so you can drive and show it off and you can talk through it. And then we'll kind of have where the heck is the stop? Okay, stop share. So we'll have kind of a bit of a focus here of tell us what it is, what the benefit of it is, how it's used, et cetera. And then we can kind of think about how that might work with the existing SDK, or if it's an addition to it, et cetera.
Great. Thanks a lot. Actually, we're 2 of us. Mark is here as well. So
yeah, Mark too, right? Yeah.
Yes. So it's both of us who kind of open source that. Actually, we started, or I started with that journey. So it's anyway an adventure from 2 companies. So we work for 2 different companies, but we worked previously together. So that's why we know each other. And there, I basically, when I started adopting Crossplane, I came along the function SDK issue 93, and it basically says, or is a wish from a user improve support of typed objects. And I got annoyed by that as well, as you today have to either you just access the object somehow, or you really have to parse, like marshal and unmarshal it more or less every time, which is kind of annoying. And then I started with the first implementation. It was called something called a manager. It worked halfway. For that we sticked with, or actually I sticked for half a year, a bit more. And then basically Mark came. And he took that. The manager looked at it and said, got the idea, but I think we can do it more clever. And that's where we then more or less ended with the inventory SDK. Actually, it's just based on the normal runtime. And let's see if I by now can share, because somehow my Mac doesn't like my Zoom. So let's see if that works.
I don't think anybody likes Zoom, so it might not just be your.
So I hope it works.
Yep, I can see the number 93 issue right now on your browser.
Yes, exactly. It's basically why I talk. Now, so that's where we started. What we came along, it's right now hosted in Mark's GitHub account. We came up with a concept of a called an inventory, and Mark, you just interrupt me if you want to say something, right? Not that I take the full stage. So basically, we came up with a concept called an inventory. So if it kind of looks like what you see here, we then also have like an example implementation. The idea is to declare in one or more Go structs what all kind of types you have or kind of objects you have. You can have maps, you can have native object, basically anything which is a runtime.object is supported. You add then tags to it. So basically you say it's an observed resource and the name. You can say it's the desired one and the name, and we even support maps. So if you have a collection of something like buckets or whatever, you can have multiple of them, and it then just gets parsed into a map where the string then is the resource key based on here the prefix. You can also control the ready state, connection details, and basically all you can do on the SDK. If we look how it works, what I did is I took the example we have on the getting started in the guides, how you write your first crossplane function in Go, and I try to implement it in the or with the inventory SDK, and it's a bit how it looks like. We have the normal function, run function entry point. We have a declared inventory. It's very simple. I just say, okay, we have an observed composite, which is from the new dev experience, a CRD, or the schema of a CRD, the X buckets. And just because I'm not very good with AWS, I just took the provider NoOp for simulating the buckets to do in AWS. Code-wise, then at the beginning, say we initialize the inventory so that you have an object. You then pass that object into the, let's say, reflection magic, which does the whole mapping between what we get from the struct P to the build from request, to the struct we defined. And after that, the inv in this case is being populated. So by now we have here on line 51, we have a completely populated inventory with all the objects we found mapped to concrete struct types. In build buckets, I put the method now into its own Go file. In here, we basically just modify the inventory. So we read, for example, here the spec we get, we do some mutations on it, or not mutation, but basically check if it's nil. We read the names for the buckets, and then we start looping over them, creating actually new provider NoOp resources which simulate our buckets here. These we assign here to a list of buckets, or a map actually, and then that map we put back into the desired bucket. So it basically ends up here in the inventory in this desired buckets map, where we say, yeah, that's a desired resource and it's a composed resource. Once all logic happens, we call again the inventory SDK to basically map whatever is now in that inventory to the response. So it basically takes all the desired resource types, puts them back to struct P so we can send them through gRPC, and we formulate response and return it back to the framework. With this, we were able to basically have 100% typed objects with, from development point of view, pretty little overhead.
So can you show the build buckets function again real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Wanted to see what the shape of that looked like again. Okay, I see. Right. Okay. So yeah. So the inventory is kind of like not a proxy object, but it's like, hey, inventory, you're the one who knows what type of objects that this function is trying to initialize and manage the life cycle of. So I'm gonna be setting these things on you inventory, and then at the end of the function before responding, it's like, okay, inventory, you've got all this information, spit it back out in something that I can give to Crossplane now. Is that kind of the high level how that flow works?
Yes, so basically you declare actually what the function cares about, either from observing or what we want to produce, and the inventory is then the translation layer you talk to, where you have then the strictly typed objects. That's the right way to look at it, yes.
And then when you declare in the inventory the types and names, I guess, of objects that you'll create, you said that it can handle like a dynamically number of created objects. Say if you have to create in number of buckets and you don't know that up front, you said the inventory handles that type of case as well.
Yes, if you declare it as a map. So here the buckets is actually already a list. So if we look at my test case, so right now we have here the bucket names. It's alpha and beta. So we want to produce two buckets in this case. And if we look at what's the result of the function, we get here a provider no-op resource with alpha and one with beta.
I see. I think in the README example, they mostly look to be like inventory objects for that are one-to-one mappings of like, hey, there's going to be a namespace object and there's going to be one of them. But it's so yeah, so that's good that it has like, okay, there might be in number of this type of object. So that's where I guess the prefix is what you were saying. That's kind of how that helps. All the composed resources will all be named with that prefix.
Exactly. So either you
Uh,
declare here on observed or desired compose to declare here, okay, that's the name. If you have a single object, that's the name I am expecting. It's basically referring to then how the function treats that name internally. Or you can say if it's with ending with a dash, basically that's the prefix, and then you just match whatever is that prefix, which will land here in this map under consideration that it matches this type somehow while parsing. Else you then get the object miss. Like if you try to put two different kinds of objects with the same name into an OOP resource, that of course won't fly. But as long as the type matches and the prefix, it will be parsed into this map. Where then the key of the map for accessing is the X buckets dash and then whatever name you got.
Yeah,
and then
correct. And we also have a generator CLI that generates constants for these tags, so that you can if you have a map function, you have this inventory desired composite buckets function that concatenates the name of the resource how it should be, so that you don't have to care about
uh,
copying and reusing all the names. You can work with these constants.
oh, nice. I think I had seen when I briefly looked at the repo earlier today. There was I think that the test patterns looked much cleaner than some of the patterns we had already had in original like upstream SDK examples and raw ones. Can you show your test functions again? Because it seemed like that was like pretty clear as like because there's been a pattern we're using raw SDK stuff of like a must struct JSON or must JSON or whatever it is, and you have like a big ugly JSON blob of the objects you have to like maintain, and that's kind of gnarly, right? And so this is more like, hey, test embedded test data with YAML files. That's what you use, and you don't have to have these ugly JSON blobs embedded into the table-driven tests. Is that right?
So we started with the struct data and I was so annoyed by it, so I implemented like basically parsing parsing from YAML files so that you can basically tell, okay, I have there a YAML file in the test data folder, and that's then or was converted to the struct B, because else no one within my team maintained those tests, as writing struct B is really not fun. And then basically Mark came with the second edition and introduced then the golden file testing, which I find personally even more clean.
And is that dependent? That doesn't require the inventory, right? That's like that inventory concept is abstracted. It's like it'll get invoked when the test case runs, but it's not the test setup itself is not dependent on the inventory SDK. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Nice.
And yeah, as it is in the golden file pattern implemented, you also, if you have a lot of changes, you can run the test with an update option. So all the files, the expected files, get generated for you. So you don't have to rewrite all the files from scratch. And also for an initial test, you can generate the output. Sure, you have to verify if it makes sense, but also yeah helps the experience for the developers.
And I just dropped into the Zoom chat an example of the ugly unit tests that are kind of harder to maintain a little bit. So this path looks a little bit cleaner, I suppose.
Yeah, so we've used the same like testing pattern back in Valuas. We've also decided that maintaining the absurd amount of like inline JSON structs is not something that we would like to do, because we've spent more time on updating tests than actually writing composition logic because of that. So we've also built like YAML file-based approach, and then just because I was lazy, we just did something like read file and then YAML to JSON, and then from JSON like must struct to proto, because I know that it's like two times we just did some byte manipulation, but we are lazy and it worked perfectly. Like all of our tests were working on that pattern with the test data files. So I can highly recommend it.
I mean, one thing I do like about the pattern of using like directly inlining, declaring the JSON is that you can see visually what the object looks like all within the test case. That's nice to be able to see it, but obviously it gets very unwieldy quickly when it's hundreds and hundreds of lines. And then also it's hard to manipulate because it's like, wait, everything we do is in YAML and this nonsense is in JSON. So this looks ugly and like, wait, oh, I missed a comma. Oh shoot, that's even worse than manipulating YAML. So there's definitely advantages to this. The other question I had, Mark and Cyril, is have you guys used the like Crossplane DevX, like in the Crossplane CLI and like the patterns there around, generating models and schemas and stuff like that, and like the test functionality that's kind of offered there? Have you guys used that much? And then how does that compare to the experience that this inventory SDK gives you for building functions and testing them?
Yeah, so the example that the example project is built on the developer experience. So as Cyril presented, and I personally, my company, yeah, we just recently moved or started migrating to the developer experience,
Mm.
and I had a CRD gen implemented myself that we used before, and so yeah, actually what I did last week is rewrite or regenerate all the CRDs or the resources that previously were generated by my tool, and I migrated to developer experience. So so I just replaced all the structs, and yeah, except some additional null handling that I had to do with the newly generated files. Yeah, everything worked flawless. So it's integrated seamless into the framework, into the existing framework.
Okay, good. So they're not like they're not mutually exclusive. They don't necessarily like conflict with
No,
each other then.
no.
Oh,
I see.
it's like we, at least on our side, we started at Bank Julius Baer that implementing the tests in Go because at least I haven't checked now if it changed recently, but in the past the cross-plane render and so on, usually they require you have Docker running, or if not, then you spin up your Go binary yourself and then somehow tell it, okay, now talk to this guy. And that not was not really satisfying, at least not for a fully automated testing in pipeline. And as we anyway had to write unit test, it was kind of just clear for us implementing also these tests in Go. Until now, we only or we 100% rely on them. We do not use the cross-plane CLI's feature of testing. We started migrating to the new DevX. It's 1.5 months ago, since we have the schema generation, and basically since Upbound released a couple of their features from Up CLI into Crossplane CLI with schema
Mm.
generations, the API structure with simple schema for the CRD generation. That solved a lot of headaches actually on our side. Before we were doing that with CRD gen from controller gen, the native Kubernetes way, and then we were kind of fiddling, patching with the YAML files underneath. So since then we started moving, but moving 10 plus production control planes to the new dev experience is not something you do overnight if you have to deliver business value, right?
Yeah, that's fair. Have Yeah, so like something that would be really cool here is like seeing other folks like around the community start to adopt this as well. To see like how this pattern kind of gains traction, etc. So yeah, you guys have like already started sharing it with the community, like in Crossplane Slack. You're here at this community meeting as well, right? So are there other things you guys want to do to kind of invite more folks to try it out too?
So if I could wish, I would like to put it into cross-plane mainline. So it's getting basically the one of the standard features everyone can profit, and not you have to read
Mm.
Slack and by accident put the right Google search or maybe AI query today that you land basically on that GitHub repo. That would be the wish. And let's see where we land.
Awesome. Do you would it be a good place to kind of keep talking through the design and like and kind of critically think through that together? Would that be like on issue 93? Have you put an update there on this? Is that a good place to continue the discussion, basically, I guess?
For me, that's fine. I mean, there we once mentioned the approach, right? I think Mark there put the question if such an inventory-based approach would be an option, and there was basically, I guess, if I remember correctly, more or less no feedback. Um,
Mm.
Mm.
Either we were not clear enough how this could work or how it could look like, or yeah, how else we can kickstart that discussion and getting people to try it out if that's something they can work with. What's clear for us, it's right now the right thing to do. We operate both our like all our production functions on this framework since not yesterday. It's not like a weekend project. It's there for quite some time now. And since then, it works pretty okay.
Yeah, and we also would be happy for feedback and yeah, design questions and improvements. So and yeah, just feedback. We will be happy to improve it, and one day maybe we can contribute into the function Go SDK as a yeah, an additional solution to improve developer experience.
Yeah, nice. Okay. Yeah, since like we've got kind of something more fleshed out now and you're kind of showing it off, like that definitely deserves more attention from like the rest of the maintainer team to kind of critically think through this a little bit more. So let me take a follow-up then too to kind of revive the discussion on issue 93. As John mentioned it in the chat as well, one potential intermediate step like instead of going directly to the upstream SDK, the full Go SDK, would be to host this if you guys are interested in the Crossplane contrib organization. So it becomes one of the official extension projects. It's in the docs, and it has more discoverability through those means as well. So that's one potential intermediate step to consider here as we think through this. That's not, I wouldn't say that's off the table from the project side at least.
Yeah, this can be an option. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So yeah, let me take a note then to kind of revive that discussion. And then we can keep following up then. And then we'll have this recording for more folks to be able to see it too. So that's another way that we can kind of share that information. Okay, on my other screen, I've put, I'm not even sharing my screen, so nobody can see what I'm doing anyways, but I put a note to follow up. Cool. Anybody else? Any other comments? John, you were putting comments in the chat. Anything you want to say out loud too, my friend? Any other ideas here?
It just looks really cool. I'm in favor of strong typing of things where we can get it, especially where we don't have to define JSON inline. So I think this looks like it could be really useful for people developing functions.
Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, well, thanks guys for coming and sharing it today. Definitely appreciate that time and kind of giving some more eyes on this. So yeah, like we should be able to get a little more momentum on this now that we're kind of talking about it more publicly together. All right, cool. Yeah, thanks for that effort. All right, now I can go ahead and share my screen again too. And where are the Zoom controls? They've moved. Awesome, great. Within one meeting, they've moved locations. But there we go. All right, we're back. Yes, okay. So John, you had a couple of PRs you wanted to bring up here. I think they're the same ones that Bob wanted to. And his name's right there. But Bob isn't here. Do you wanna mention these then, John?
Yeah. So the first one is a PR to. So this is something that Bob has had outstanding for a while. Basically, as a part of putting together the work for the up-to-date condition, which we're going to be using to like present the diff of an object when you have it in observe mode, so that people can tell whether the provider would actually make a change if you were to give it create and update rights. So as a part of implementing that in provider Kubernetes as a test bed, we discovered that there are a couple of different like logical use cases for where you would want to for like import behavior essentially, and we settled on there kind of being two. The first one being I would like to reference this object with the intention of Crossplane eventually coming to own this object, right? So that would be considered kind of comparable to the import case, right? Like a Terraform import. That's really useful because we've been talking about like V2 migrations, right? Migrating from V1 to V2 resources. And that ties in pretty closely with the up-to-date condition case where, I want to import something, and if I can see based on the statuses on the object that the controller is not going to try to change anything in this object, then I can go ahead and give it the rights to own that object, and then say Crossplane has now taken it over against whatever GitOps Crossplane is running against. I will know that my GitOps is a correct reflection of what actually exists in my provider. The second case is a non-import reference, right? So you're referring to an object that is owned and maintained elsewhere. So one example of this that I have from my own infrastructure is like I have a piece of infra that like declares and manages a VPC, but then within my Kubernetes clusters that live in that VPC, I need to also have references to that VPC. So I want to, inside of those the leaf node clusters, I want to be able to have a reference to that VPC object without trying to manage it, right? But that is like permanently in a reference state. So I don't ever care about what's in the for provider of that object. I just need to read from that provider, right? What its status is. And thinking about that flag, whether we want to own something or whether we want to reference it, is kind of where we ended up on this management policies options thing again, which is a change that Bob has had open for a while. And we basically came back to it, and we think that the right approach for management policies is no longer a list of management policies, but is a map of management policies, where the keys are the name of the management policy that you would wish to grant, and then the additional keys within those that nested object is a set of options. Like the sort of import to own or import for reference. And there's some other stuff in this PR, other flags you might want to have, like there's something in there around like an upsert, right? Like if you have the create management policy and you discover in the process of creation that object already exists, is that a success? And you have now have successfully imported and owned that object, or is that a failure because of a conflict, right? So the behavior around create can also be managed with these sort of similar flags. So I think that's kind of the nutshell version of this, is why we think that refactoring management policy options, refactoring management policies around this sort of option struct is the way to go forward for this.
And was it because I've definitely been happy to let you and Bob and Phil and Lovro kind of be working through some of this challenging design, so I'm not super up to speed on it. But was it already, I imagine it was already discussed, John, that how this would work with like it'd be in a backwards compatible way? Would this be like a, hey, let's do breaking change to management policies that everybody gets hit by, or is like, hey, the way you've always specified them, it continues to work, and behind the scenes there's some conversion to this new scheme or something like that?
Yeah, so you could do it with a conversion webhook, I think, or you could add just kind of a concurrent top level key, right, where you have management policies or management policies struct, for lack of a better term. Name it something that's useful, and we can deal with it that way. The compatibility. If you declare the new one, you'll get it the new way, and if you declare the old one, it'll keep working.
I see. So it wasn't necessarily the intent to be like, yep, let's totally change this thing and everybody's got to absorb it. Like that isn't what's on the table.
I think it's eventually, yes. I think we would like this to be the new way. Eventually, it would be it would be a breaking change to the schema. But I do think that we can deal with conversion in a safe way.
Got it. Cool. And then so it looks like there's recent discussion on this as well. Is Bob, are you and Bob planning on like pushing on this and driving it early in the 2.5 milestone, so we've got time to get traction and decisions on it?
I think so. So Bob's going to come up with a one pager. He said he was going to come up with it this week, and then we'll have something more concrete than just the comments in here to talk about.
Cool. That sounds like a great step then. Okay, cool. So we'll be on the lookout for that. And I talked to Bob too in the steering committee, last steering committee meeting last week about there are some features that he's been wanting to land for a couple of releases now. So, the more we can push on early in the milestone, the better off we'll all be for getting things to land.
Right.
Okay, that sounds good. And then you had another one too, John, you wanted to bring
That's
up?
the same thing. They're the
It's all
same
part of this
change.
stuff. Oh, okay.
The
Cool.
up-to-date condition kind of surfaced the management policy options.
Got it. Right on. Okay, and sounds good. Thank you for bringing that up then. And Jonas, I see you bringing up something as well.
Yeah, Bob has added that to community Slack channel a few days ago. And that issue is especially hitting provider Helm and provider Kubernetes. Because currently in Crossplane runtime, we do not skip update and late initialize for non-existing external resources. And because provider Kubernetes and now provider Helm use server-side apply, that leads to actual creation of the resource, even if it did not exist at the update time, which is not a sane behavior. You should not create on update of non-existent resource. So it's just
Even
something
if the
that we
management
should,
policies.
yeah.
Oh, so sorry, and that happens even when management policies doesn't specify create.
Yes. Yeah, because
That sounds wrong.
yeah, in these particular cases, it's because of server-side apply. It does not differentiate between update and create, right? So provider Kubernetes observes there's no resource, but okay, I run update. It updates non-existing resource with server-side apply, so it actually creates it in the cluster with not full, not all fields that's supposed to be there. So that's something that we should probably have a look at sooner than later. And I think that we probably should backport it as well to 2.4 because it did not make it into the release cycle. And it's not it's a bug in Crossplane runtime, in my opinion. So we probably should have a proper look at it. And I don't have maintainer on Crossplane runtime right now, so someone has to do it.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, this is interesting for sure. I think we've already got like a 2.4.1 planned to do that we'll do anyways, because Philippe is driving a fix that for the issue where CRDs are not reliably ownership is not reliably transferred across package revisions, and that hits eventually everybody hits that. So I think we're already planning on doing a 2.4.1 that would include that. So then having this potentially, there is going to be a release vehicle already that this could potentially be included in.
Okay, great.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. And we got a lot of representatives for Bob today. Thank you for folks advocating on behalf of Bob today. All right, cool. Well, that's all the agenda. That's then there's nothing else on here. Any last minute things that folks want to bring up before we are out of time?
Yeah, if I had a wish for the developer experience scheme generation for the Go. As I said, I migrated last week all my schemas, and it would be great if these generated structs could implement something like meta v1 object, that it would make it easier to access the metadata resources. Currently, everything is with pointers, and they have to do a lot of null checks. But since metadata is a required resource for all resources, there should not be an issue on implementing the interface to access this information. So this would really make my code a lot cleaner and would help me a lot.
And
I think, don't quote me on that because I've not used DevX for a few months already, but I believe there are getters for all the metadata fields that are generated.
Yeah, they are getters, but you still get the pointer resource back, and there's not much difference between using the getter and using the field directly. And especially for the metadata part, the Meta v1 object interface or part of the object could probably easily be implemented.
And Mark, is there already an issue that's tracking that and describing this behavior?
Nope,
Open?
not yet, no.
Oh, okay. Yeah, please do follow up to get that written down, because I heard some of the things you were saying, but I don't know if I deeply understood it. So being able to see it in print and following along would be better, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I can do that.
Cool. Yeah, then feel free to send a link to it once you open it too, so folks see it.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, awesome. Thanks for the great discussion, guys. Mark and Israel, thanks for showing off the inventory SDK that you've built. Let's keep kind of pushing on all these things that could be potential good improvements for the whole ecosystem. So yeah, thanks for everybody for joining today and chatting through all that stuff. And we'll try to finish off the rest of the 2.4 release today. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.